This is Marshall Shannon with Ministry Design Training and MinistryDesignConcepts.com. I'm a pre-construction navigator, and I'm going to answer a question today that is asked of me regularly by senior pastors and other ministry leaders, and that is when you're preparing to build, you're planning to build, why do projects fail so often? I don't have any hard data to give to you to guarantee you that research has been done and here is the number of projects that failed. But the best I can tell from watching over the years, particularly the last nearly 10 years, where I've served as a project consultant for 2 different national church builders and now as my own pre-construction navigator with Ministry Design Concepts, is I'm guessing the number's around 70%. 7 out of 10 churches that wish to build, that plan to build, that start the process, stumble, trip, and have to stop planning. They don't go any further. And so as we talk about this, there's a real need. Part of this presentation, I warn you on the front end, is somewhat like driving to stay out of the ditches. You're trying to avoid getting off the road and having a wreck, or getting bogged down in the deep tall grass or into the trees. And so as we go through this, I am giving you not just theory, I'm giving you actual projects while I'll hide where they are and who they are and when it happened. I am not talking to you out of theory of what the industry professionals say. I am sharing with you my experience in the last 30 plus years where I've watched one project after another fail. And so as we go through this, understand that the most important part of preparing to build is to have your house in order. And so in doing this, your ministry design, where you discover it's several things. And so in looking at this, here's the first thing I want you to consider, and that is if your ministry design is underdeveloped or undeveloped, and you cannot clearly answer to me or to yourself or to anyone else, who are you as a church? What are your defining characteristics and collective shape? Shape being your spiritual gifts, your heart, your abilities, your personalities, and your experience, your collective shape as a church. Why do you exist? What has God called you to do? How are you called to do it? What are you actually doing? Where are you contextually? Where are you in your ministry? Who is in your community? Who are you called to reach? What are they like? What is most important to you right now to your ministry? What is mission critical to you? What is the bandwidth of your ministry, the capabilities of it, and the capacity of your ministry to handle new converts? What is the bandwidth of your property? How many folks can you get on your property at one time, and how are you going to minister to them? Where are they going to have to be? What ministry space is needed most? Where is your main focus? What is your disciple-making process? What is your volunteer recruitment process? In other words, if you do not have your church, you have not determined the answers to these questions, let me encourage you to start working on getting your house in order and your ministry design developed, matured, working, so that in a new building you'll know better what you're to build, how much you can spend, and how you're going to use it. And so in the discovery phase of your ministry design is you have congregational discovery. You're to know, do we know what our core values are? Are they in misalignment or in agreement? So congregationally, does your congregation understand your ministry's core values, and are they individually and as families in alignment, in agreement or in misalignment and disagreement with the core values that drives the second thing, your mission. You can have competing causes. People can feel like the mandate of the church, and you have to balance this out, is to take care of them. They view themselves as the consumers and as the chief interest of the church, and so it's all internally focused. Then you may have competing causes where you feel like the primary cause of the church is evangelism, not edification, and not meeting the needs of your church family. And churches normally, naturally have tension between the Great Commission's call to reach people with the gospel and at the same time to build them up in their faith. So you've got to have and determine where you are with your competing causes. Vision. You hear guys talk about a church having double vision. That's where you're seeing the same thing twice. I prefer to talk about it as dueling visions. And that is identifying that people in your church may have a different vision for your ministry as to its destination, what it's going to become when it's full grown, what it's going to look like. And I'm told by guys who keep up with it, like Gary McIntosh, that the number one cause of pastors being dismissed from ministries is dueling visions. The chairman of the elders or deacons or another church leader, depending on certain things about your church, has a different vision for the work, and finally it comes to a head, and you better find that out before you go into a building program, because your core values, your mission, and your vision will direct the design of your building. Another thing to discover is the code or the ethos or the essence of your church. Now, I'm sad to tell you that the church in North America, 85% of them have either plateaued or in decline. Their code of the very ethos or essence of who they are is not what they want you to think it is. And they may be just totally self-centered in their focus, and they'd like to think that it is to win souls and make disciples, but it probably is something else. Like, let's just get church over with, or we're fine just like we are, or we'll take care of who we've got, or we're not willing to accept new people, or we don't want to expend ourselves to reach more people or take care of them after we reach them. Another area of discovery is your culture. The environment in which you bring people into, what is it like? Are there silos where there's competition between ministries in your church? And so when it comes to a building program, you're going to be competing, part of your church group, competing with another group over the money and the design and the building of this new building. So I would tell you next to look at you need to discover your congregational condition. Is your church fit for a building program, or would you say they're just healthy, which is one level under fit? Or are they unhealthy, unfit, unhealthy? Maybe they're dying or dead. And the next thing is you've got to discover your congregational buy-in to your ministry and to your project, or you're going to get yourself in trouble. Then there's a time of community discovery. Demographics answers the questions about who the people are, their nationality, whether they own or rent their home, what their annual income is, maybe their education level. It tells you about the people. But psychographics tells you what the people are thinking, their lifestyle, their values, how they view church, how they view themselves, and so it's their thinking gets involved. And then eclographics, which is much harder to get a hold of, tells you who are in the churches in your community, and tells you about the demographics and psychographics of them, so that you can have an idea. If you're going to build something to minister in a certain way, you better have a grasp on your community in a number of ways. There needs to be common links between your congregation and your community. When you plan to build, you need to know what bridges you have one to the other, because your design of your building might be directed by a bridge that you're wanting to build So you accommodate a ministry with a tool of additional ministry space. So I look at three things. I look at the bridges you build and that you need, the belts that holds it all together, and the bundles. So you look at the bridges, the belts, and the bundles, where you're bundling together and holding them together with belts, so you have ministries where you find common links between your community and your congregation. You have these things, and where ministries trip up is when they don't have a clear determination of your core values, mission clarity, vision clarity, a strategic plan for carrying out that ministry, and you end up with problems. And so into the design phase of strategic planning, what is your particular plan for obeying God's calling? How are you carrying out God's calling in your church? What do you do to give you the easiest avenue to people in your community? How can you best connect with them? Is there agreement in your congregation on how your ministry design would translate into a facility design? Is there agreement about how that will look? Is there agreement about your ministry priorities? Most of us, our wallet cannot support our wish list. We have to prioritize what ministry needs are going to receive attention in the new building, how it's designed and built. So you have to prioritize in your first, second, and third phase what's most important in your ministry. Not an easy thing, and it can create heated discussion among you and your leadership and your congregation. Is there agreement about your overall game plan to fulfill the Great Commission in your ministry? Are all your ministries in alignment? If not, read the book Simple Church and apply the formula there for redesigning your ministry to bring everything into alignment. The delivery is the implementation of your game plan, your design. Are the ministries in alignment? What about your ministry performance? Are you organized, coordinated, orchestrated, and interrelated? Is your teamwork going together well? So as you look at the process of this, is your ministry productive? Is there spiritual transformation taking place? And are you getting the results you planned? So as you look at the implementation of your strategic plan, is it's working together? Is it in alignment? Are you happy with the performance? Where you know you're organized, you know that things are coordinated and orchestrated together by your leaders and lay volunteers. Is it all interrelated together? Do you feel like you have good teamwork and good team chemistry between the different ministries in your church? And are you getting the results that you thought you would get with your design? Then you've got to follow up. People who don't continue to monitor and measure and modify and continue to manage the implementation of their strategic plan are going to have problems. This is paramount that you have together your ministry design and have followed a process so that you're ready to tell the industry professionals what they're to design and build so that you can function in it. You've got to know, folks, whether you're playing baseball, football, basketball, or soccer, because each sport has everything different about itself. Uniforms, equipment, training, player placement, the money it takes to make it happen, where you carry it out, how you carry it out, everything is different. So you better have your ministry design in place. So let me summarize this. Church identity about who you are, what you're called to do, and how you're called to do it. Community intelligence about who you're trying to reach, where you're trying to reach them, how you're trying to reach them. And a ministry master plan that precedes your site master plan that tells you what is your long-term vision for your church and your campus. What are your church model benchmarks? Projected growth cycle, your projected age cycle, your ministry or your site master plan of your property, where you say, well, this is what we're going to build right now first, here's what we'll plan to do second, third, and how you weave together your existing facilities with projected new facilities all comes into play when you look at how your church is estimated to age and to grow in number, so that you develop a unique church model for the future of your church as you look at it today. It's because what you're doing is you're going to design and build facilities to let your church family operate as God has designed it. So, what is your game plan? So that you can design your next building to fit into your game plan. We then move into the construction part, and this is where probably the majority of you are wishing I would get past the ministry design and get to the construction process, which is maybe where you already are. So let me ask you this. What do you think is at stake? What is at stake with your building project? First, I would say your money is at stake, the Lord's money, stewardship, that you may end up spending a lot of it and not get a building at the end of your process. The second thing is your ministry. The failure rate of ministries, of building projects, affects how long a senior or lead pastor stays at the church. So what's at stake? Well, I tell you, your money, your ministry, and your momentum. When I say ministry, the average tenure of a pastor, length of time he stays after a building project, is 18 months and he's gone. I have two different ministries that companies I work for were a part of, and I was not a part of the planning process of them. But both of them failed after the design was done. It was time to get them permitted and start construction, and the churches had failed. The project failed. Both pastors left shortly after, and those ministries, to my knowledge, have never done anything. So folks, the answer to my question of what is at stake, well, the Lord's money is at stake, your ministry there is at stake, and the momentum of your ministry to move forward to reach more people in your community and around the world is at stake here if you fail. There's a high failure rate. As I said earlier, I'm guessing it's around 70%, but I would be surprised if it's 85 or 90%. And I'm trying to help you get it down to the 5 to 10% failure rate. So, as we go through this, I'm going to give you real life examples and talk through how do projects fail. First, they fail to select the right people. In your congregation, you've got to use some wisdom about selecting the right people to be on your building committee, your subcommittees, and your special teams, where they're working together to produce the needed information and make the right decisions so that you can give it to the industry professionals to design, engineer, and build your new building. If you get people who can't get along, who don't work well together, who don't have a commitment with and an agreement with your core values, your mission, your vision, and your strategic plan, and they are not committed to it, now you've got dueling visions or dueling missions or conflicting core values, or they don't agree with how you're going about fulfilling the Great Commission in your game plan. You've got to put the right people on there. I'm dealing with a project where they want to renovate thousands of square feet, and we can't get past the leaders because they don't agree. And so nothing happens, and it just sits. This is not uncommon. Selecting the industry professionals who have good chemistry with, and they buy into your mission and ministry there, and they're willing to expend themselves so that they, not only chemistry, but their competency and capabilities to perform to the measure and level of work that you need done in all areas with all the players. Putting together the wrong team of people in-house and in your industry professionals is a reason why ministries fail. They don't get the right people. Jim Collins, in his book Good to Great, says key to the future of an organization going from good to great is getting the right people on, he calls it your bus. and then on the right seats. And I tell you, in the right groups together. You don't get the right group together so that you've got the right people from your congregation and the right people from your industry professionals, you're gonna have problems. And ministry after ministry has stumbled during the preparation phase where they're just trying to put together the team. You've got to select the right purpose. There was a book written in 1991 and published that is entitled When Not to Build. And he deals with 9 or 10 purposes that pastors have said why they want to build. 8 of the 9 are wrong. And the only right answer is that the new building will provide a tool for your ministry to fulfill its God-given purpose. In other words, you're not trying to use a building project to do spiritual work in the lives of your people where you think, well, their giving's not what it ought to be, therefore we'll give them a building project and then they'll build, then they'll commit. And so you go through trying to do with the building what only you can do as the shepherd and as the leader of these people to challenge them spiritually. Now, having said that, I am not saying that God is not going to use the building to bring glory to his name and to do good to your people, to make them, as James chapter 1, verses 3 and 4 say, that he brings life's testing times into our life to build our individual endurance and to build our spiritual maturity, to make us entire, to make us complete, lacking nothing. But I am telling you that you better have the right reason for building, or your people are likely to identify that you don't have the right purpose for building, and they won't buy into it. Selecting the right land. I have watched a church, more than one, buy the wrong land. They overbuy too much land, or they buy land that they've not looked at not only the cost of the land, but the cost of developing the land, and they can't get the first building started because they didn't count the cost correctly. Selecting the right land involves a whole list, and we've got a webinar on selecting the right land, securing the right land for your ministry. So if you bought the wrong land, you got too little land, or the wrong shape of land, or the wrong topo of land, or the wrong development cost, or development parts of your property, you can mess up by not selecting the right land. If you don't secure buy-in from your congregation, from your lender, from your local authorities, that they agree with what you're doing. But folks, if you don't have buy-in where your people are committing to it and taking ownership of it, you're in trouble. Determining what is mission critical. Everybody has to prioritize their ministry. Not all of us can say, well, we're going to build a 250,000 square foot of facility here, or whatever your number would be, because you just have an unlimited wallet. I've only done one project in 10 years where the building committee said, design it as big as you want it, we're going to pay cash for it. Only one. It's the only one I know of. Most of us are limited by our wallet, which makes us set priorities about what is mission critical. What do we need to build next? Here's another area in preparation for a building program, is that all of a sudden the pastor gets up and says, well, we need a building. Well, there's been no saving money way in advance. So let me give you a formula. Before you ever plan to do a capital campaign for your new building, for your new facility, and you do it in-house or you hire a consultant, way back 5 years before this, why don't you divide the estimated cost of your loan, your payment, into 5 parts and raise your general fund budget by 1/5 for each year, so that within 5 years your people have been challenged and you've been setting aside money. This will do 2 things. Number one, the new payment will not be a shock. You'll be able to show the bank that you've been planning and building toward this for 5 years. Number 2, not only will you have the capability of making the payment that you had estimated when it comes time to getting in your new building, but you also will have been saving money for 5 years. It's a chronic problem. You can't all of a sudden just tell your congregation, we need to raise $1 million. Most of us get in trouble with that. So during the preparation phase, a lot of projects fail. They fail. So if you fail to get buy-in, I've seen congregations not buy in and the project died due to the lack of congregational support. The leadership did not secure the approval of their congregation prior to spending all the money to prepare to build. Another preparation area that I did not have written on the PowerPoint during the preparation thing was selecting the right pathway. How you go about preparing and planning, you can end up choosing the wrong way to approach the planning, and you spend a lot of money, and then you find out that you can't build. We'd rather you identify and vet the project before you spend much or any money. So in doing this, you ought to plan well. That's the second step toward getting in your new building. Securing the right planning approach. And without going too much into it, if you don't want to design something that is 3 times what you can afford because you didn't bother to go put together a team of people who would help you correctly estimate how much you can afford and how much of that you ought to spend of what you can afford, and then design within your capabilities. And so having a team of industry professionals put together with your building team in-house, with your building committee, your subcommittee, and your special teams, can help you look on the front end. Even just a pre-construction navigator like myself can help you look at what can you afford, what should you spend, what is the likelihood of the cost of your new building, what's your programming look like, and help you before you ever go any further determine so you don't design something you can't build. Determining what you can afford and should spend, setting a total project budget to give guidance to your construction and design team is a common area that churches fail. Programming correctly. I literally had a pastor, while we are sheetrocking his educational wing of his brand new facility, look at it and go, oh, we're not going to have enough Sunday school rooms. Well, he didn't program correctly, and nor did the folks planning on the front end, and I wasn't a part of the planning process and the programming process. But to tell the builder after you've designed this thing and now you're under construction that it's not designed correctly that's just a huge snafu. He's going to move into that project was 38,000 square feet. And then you discover that you don't have adequate Sunday school space. Wow. Wow, folks. You want to talk about ending your ministry or hurting your ministry or taking credibility out of your name? Do that as a leader. Determining condition of existing buildings and what needs they have. You have to really blend together if you're on a piece of property and you've got existing buildings that are some years old, failing to determine the condition of your existing buildings and what their financial needs are, and what you might have to do to weave together your new buildings with your old. I'll give you an example. Working with the church, and again, I wasn't part of the planning. I was just a part of a company that was doing it, and they had a building that was built in the 70s, one that was built in the 90s, and then they built one in the last 3 years. None of them look alike. They didn't weave the appearance of anything together, and they all ended up being buildings that stood alone. So you're driving to your campus and you're looking at a 70s style building, a 90s style building, and a 2010 style building, and no consideration given to the needs of the 70s or the 90s building. And in your facility management, we'll get to it in a moment, you've got to take care of all of it. They could have spent a little bit of money and brought everything up to speed to look like they'd actually planned to build through the years. Failure to secure loan commitment during the planning stage. and you're just guessing. Or the bankers that you talked to said, sure, we'll be happy to talk with you. You took that as a loan commitment. You need to get a letter of commitment from a lender that states certain terms that he is committing to loan you the money on your project. And I would do it before I got too far down the road and spending money with the industry professionals. Failure to do land and code analysis before master planning. I had another project, and with every one of these examples, I could take the time to give you a real live example, take you to the property and to the leaders and to the industry professionals that did this. But the construction team and design team, the project team, did not do proper land and code analysis before they spent the thousands of dollars on a master plan, and found out afterwards that what they had wanted to do on the property, they couldn't put the buildings where they wanted to. Well, you've got to uncover these things and ask questions. We can provide you with a list of questions to ask and verify in writing what the codes say. And I'm not guarantee you there still won't be failure by myself or your construction team, but know to go. Selecting the wrong delivery system for your project. I had a pastor call me after their building was built and they used one delivery system. Found out that he had no finished as-is building construction documents. They didn't get the lighting, nor the HVAC design, nor some other things designed and built as they had told they wanted, because they picked the wrong company and the wrong delivery system for their church. They wanted to have more control. So it bit them. They got the building, thankfully, within their budget, but it wasn't the building that they had wanted. They should have picked a different delivery system. Why is it important to prepare and to plan correctly? Well, it's because you've got so much at stake. And if you fail to prepare and plan well, it's well nigh impossible for you to spend correctly, to spend wisely, and often it can stop you from getting the building that you wanted. Because during the preparation, if you don't get congregational buy-in, or you don't select the right planning approach, planning pathway, or you are land poor, or you fail to get the right team members on board, or you pick the wrong land that has too many problems with it that you can't get by, you can't afford to build on it, or you can't carry out and build enough on it, or there isn't enough usable land for some reason. All of these are problems. Failure to prepare to save in advance is a problem. So, lack of due diligence, lack of land purchase, the right land purchase, hiring the wrong professionals, putting the wrong people in your church on the committee, picking the wrong delivery system, estimating the cost incorrectly of what you can afford and what you should spend, and some idea of the cost of square footage within a range and what your programming is. All of these are planning and preparation problems where you don't secure the right financing or get a letter of commitment, or you misestimate the end result of a capital campaign, and you're failing to count the cost. During the preparation and planning stage, if you fail to do so, you're going to release the architect, the engineers, and your builder to work together as a team along with other industry professionals to design it. You're going to start spending a lot of money, and once you get into construction, if you're able to build what you designed, you've released it. So the cost of your project goes up, and your control of the decision making and control of the project goes down. Then we move into the design phase and want to talk about that. And so in the design phase, failure to design within your project budget. There are 7 things that I break your project budget down into. If you have to buy land, that's number 7. But number 1 is architect and engineers. Number 2 is the site work. Number 3 is your structure. Number 4 is your your furnishings, fixtures, equipment, and others, and extra stuff. The fifth thing is that of pre-construction cost, where you've got to pay interest on your construction loan. You've got permitting to get. You may have some other costs, like myself as a pre-construction navigator, that's a part of your pre-construction costs before you ever build. And then you have contingency funds that you have to plan for the unexpected, the unknown, and have 3, 5, maybe more percentage of the total cost of your project set aside in savings, because projects have unexpected and unforeseen expenditures during construction. So what is a design problem where churches fail? They fail to design within your project budget. You keep telling the architect you want more, and you'll figure out how to pay for it. That's a mistake. And it costs churches a lot of money, a lot of ministry, and a lot of momentum. Failure to accurately estimate the cost of your design and project. Let me encourage you, and we'll talk about this in our webinar on selecting the right ministry delivery system, that you need to have people on board who know what it costs to build in your area and the kind of building that you're building, both with the site work and the structure and the cost of your equipment and furnishings and fixtures, so that you can accurately estimate the cost of your design and your project, the whole thing together. It is an art and a science. The cost of the structure, the cost of the site work. The next area where they fail is failure to identify potential change orders during design. You can't ask a design team, or you shouldn't ask a design team to be perfect. There's only been 2 perfect buildings designed in one boat, and the architect was God himself. And beyond that, there are no perfect buildings designed. There's no perfect site plan designed by your civil engineer. And failure to have a lot of eyeballs looking at your plans and to try and identify potential change orders that will cost you. I've been taught that the average $1 million commercial building in the United States, when it was finished building, cost 10% more, 1.1. Then I had them later, and I can't verify this, talk about 1.3 million. I just had industry professionals say it's escalated. Failure to have lots of eyes on the design as it is developed. One case where a friend of mine was standing at a design table looking with the industry professionals and with the building committee there, and they were going to build a gym. And he had been involved in basketball and athletics all of his life. And he raised his hand and asked the question, are we going to have spectators at your basketball games for your adults and children in high school and junior high? And they said yes. He said, well, the building's not wide enough. You've got 3 feet on either side of the court. Where are they going to sit? It was then that the architect, the engineers, the building team, the committee turned and looked and went, whoops. Sometimes the least qualified person, or the last person you would expect to catch a design flaw that doesn't correctly fit your ministry design, will identify something and save you a lot of heartache. Failure to continue to estimate the cost during the design phase. Your architect, once he's finished with the master plan in your schematics, will develop your plans 30%, 50%, 60%, 70%, 85%, 100%. And as he goes through and you make changes as you go through the design, you need to continue estimating the cost, because that design phase may change, or your environment, the cost of where you're building, may change, and you need to keep revisiting that all the way through the process. During construction, failure to control your church order change orders during construction. Change orders come from 3 sources: aberrations in the architect's design, where there are conflicts, where something interlocks, where you've got the plumbing and the electrical taking the same place in the building, and one has to go over or around the other. That kind of thing is going to happen. As I said before, there's no perfect plans, but you can control the third and most frequent source of change orders is not the architect, it's not the government, it's the church. And so if you're looking at the building and then giving the builder changes and giving the architect and the engineer changes, and you have to pay for redesign and you have to pay for the builder to make his changes and stop what he is doing and insert a new change, all because you didn't plan well on the front end, you didn't discipline yourself to determine what you could afford, and you go through. And projects can end up costing way more than they did at the front end because you failed to control your wanter. Facility management. Failure to include your existing facilities and campus in your project planning and design. So you built a new building, but you failed to consider the cost of your new building woven into the projected future cost of either repairing or replacing or renovating or remodeling or refurbishing your existing facilities. The average commercial building that is used in retail, let's say, has figured out that every 3, 5 to 7 years they're going to have to replace carpet or tile or repaint, or they're going to have to renovate and then redesign and remodel the inside or outside of their building because it looks dated. The churches don't do that. Often, not everyone. I'm not saying condemning everyone. I'm saying that they're not looking at this and including in their budget, annual budget, general fund, to care for their facilities, the cost of what they're building added to what they now have. And so when facility management comes, you may get your building bill, but then not understand how you're going to maintain all of it or bring your existing buildings up to speed with your new building, and it hurts your overall ministry, or you have to rob part of your ministry to take care of facility because you didn't look at the bandwidth of your money. Failure to blend the old with the new so they look and operate and meet the expectancy of your community as they're invited and brought in to your facility. Failure to consider the cost of remodeling, renovating your existing facilities and campus. With this, let me give several things to you and run back through these as a help. You have all kinds of examples where churches failed, and I give these to you as 2 extra ones. I had a situation where a church and the construction team failed to include the paving on their site work, and it killed the project because they didn't have big enough margins in their planning. And when they inserted what was a good bit of money into the budget, the thing was designed, they were ready to get it permitted, and the project died because the church had stretched itself to the end of its bandwidth in a snafu in the planning, which could happen to me and you and anyone else. We're not infallible. But in doing so, the project died. They couldn't come up with the money to make it right. Planning and designing correctly and counting the cost and including everything in the budget takes a lot of work. If you want to spend the Lord's money wisely, you better plan correctly. Another area was not that they failed to put everything, they failed to put everything into the budget. Then other times they've underestimated the true cost of the project. A big area that they get bit often is the site work. It's hard to estimate. It takes a lot of work, and there's a bit of art with it in trying to budget enough money to the site work. You better get civil engineers and graders who actually do the work, and your design team to estimate that part of your building correctly. There's plenty of things outside the environment that's outside of your control as a team and as a church, such as the problem we had in our country here in America, in the United States, October of '08. All of a sudden we had the financial struggles that we had, and the economy went into the tank, and churches that had secured lending and had plenty of banks courting them for their business, all of a sudden they withdrew and projects died. One project I know of in that situation, the bank was forced to withdraw their lending in the middle of construction. You can't control things outside of your control, but you can do due diligence and plan well within your own environment that you do control in an effort to plan well. Another example is where a church went through and did their planning, designed the concept plan, they got through the master plan, and then had come to find out that the right people were not looking at the plan. We thought they were, and they weren't. And when it came time to go to the construction drawings to the next phase, then they found out that someone said, no, that building, I'm not going to use it. It won't meet our needs. They didn't bring the right people in to help them do the preparation and planning. And they designed, thankfully, just the conceptual design, and they had to go back to the drawing board. So as you look at this, there's thing after thing that can harm you as you look to move ahead with your facilities. Plan well. I'm Marshall Shannon, your pre-construction navigator, a ministry design coach with ministrydesigntraining.com and ministrydesignconcepts.com. You can reach me at my office at this number or at this number on my cell phone. It's my desire that the Lord would give you an enjoyable, successful, productive project where you could make a great impact in your community and for the world in your new facility. It's our desire at Ministry Design Concepts and Ministry Design Training that God would honor your efforts, that you would plan well and spend wisely, and that you would have an impact for eternity, both for your community, your country, and around the globe.